Hi everyone, welcome to the latest episode of PhD-Politico Discussions. I'm really excited today to be joined by Reinier van Lanschot, the co-president of Volt Europa, the pan-European political party. Hi Reinier, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Still a bit exhausted, I must say, from the Dutch electoral campaign that ended last week. And one of the interesting factors is that instead of having some time to breathe, the next session for the people that are elected in parliament and all the work starts at 10 a.m. the next morning. So we're still in the moving train, but a very positive moving train because we had electoral success. Super enthusiastic.
I do want to talk about the Dutch elections because it was really a really interesting result generally. I do want to particularly talk about Volt's performance in it, but first, I just want to start by so just an introduction to the party. It was founded. The Volt Europa was founded in 2017, and if I'm not mistaken, you played a big role in Volt Netherlands, which is obviously the Dutch wing of the party.
Yeah.
Why did you feel the need to get involved? What was it about Volt which you thought I need to be a member of this, get involved in this?
The shortest answer is because I think the idea is incredibly good and logical. The longer answer is, my name is Reinier, I'm 31 years old. I live in Amsterdam. I was born in France, but both of my parents are Dutch, and I grew up most of my life in the Netherlands. And what I always thought is that, well, the world is moving in a right direction. Like the arc of the universe or of history is long, but it's bended towards justice. I like that quote, and I always thought, well, actually, it's moving in the right direction, and there's no reason for me to get involved. But from around the beginning of the last decade, we saw this rise in right-wing nationalism, which happened not only in the United States, but also in the UK and in the Netherlands and in Austria and in Germany and in France and in Italy. It was just big right-wing nationalistic, populistic wave. And that made me concerned because for the first time in my life, I thought, hey, actually, this is not going in the right direction anymore. And it also, for me, was super illogical because what I've noticed is we live in this globalized world where so many things are super connected. I used to work in the retail industry, and the average product that we sold in our stores traveled 2,000 kilometers. The average phone has components that come from dozens of different countries. So we're so connected across borders in the way we live and the way we do business that also a lot of the challenges that we face are highly international and global, climate change being the most profound and big example. So it was so contradictory for me that one would expect for these challenges that transcend borders, more international cooperation. But the exact opposite was happening. Yeah. So I thought to myself, you know what? Somebody should do something about that. And then in 2017, I met the founders of Volt, and they were doing something about it. And they actually said to me, hey, you are somebody too. You could be one of those people that does something about that. Yeah. And it started as a couple of hours, but it turned out it grew and it grew and it grew. And 9 months later, I quit my job that I really enjoyed to volunteer full time for Volt, which I did for 1.5 years. Then I was out of my savings. But then by that time, we had enough stability in our organization that I could live from working for Volt full time as well. And we're still there. Yeah.
It's interesting. So you have so Volt now across the continent has 29 national branches, the EU 27 plus the UK and Switzerland. I'm just wondering, as co-president, how difficult is that to sort of organize that? Obviously, you have so many different national languages, so many different branches. How hard is it to sort of organize one party across the entire continent, as it were?
It's definitely a challenge. It's where the pioneering happens. What I forgot to end my story with was actually to go full circle back to the beginning, because why is the idea so good? Basically, what they told me at that meeting in the end of 2017 is we should have European political parties. It's if you look at our current system, you can you can compare it to having a national one nation where you only have local political parties that only try to fight for local interests. It's just really it can paralyze the progress of your society. And I thought that idea was so good. Let me try and help there. But that's also where the pioneering happens, because we want to bring the European politics to the European level. And that, of course, hasn't been done before. So there's a lot of different hurdles and challenges that we face. But the good thing about it is I don't have to do it on my own. We're a group of thousands of volunteers, all doing it together. And we make a lot of mistakes, then we learn from them, and then we improve, and then we continue. And then our improved model has other challenges, and then we adapt again. And that's basically how we do it.
So one of obviously Volt's big policies is the idea of an idea of a federal Europe, a federal union, I think is the quote on your website. Yes. And I mean, that idea really does interest me, so I want to ask lots of questions about it. I'm just wondering, in terms of if someone was to ask you, what is your national identity? How would you respond to that? Would you say European? Would you say Dutch, French? What would be your sort of?
I would say Dutch. Yeah, when I think in Dutch. When the European Football Cup will be played, I'm rooting for the Dutch team. But I mean, identity for me is layered. So yeah. I also feel European. I also feel a citizen of Amsterdam, but I also feel close to the city that I've studied in, which is Utrecht. So I think, there's a lot of components that constitute what your identity is. So the nation state is not the most defining factor for me.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know if you know, but in the UK, in England, we've had the census this month. Every 10 years you do a census, and obviously one of the questions was national identity, and I must admit I had to think quite hard. I think I ended up putting English, British, and European as my three different answers, because it was obviously, I found it quite hard just to pick one identity, as it were. So it's interesting. So So I guess I want to ask about a federal Europe. Why do we need a formalized federal union, do you think? Why do we need a formalized European nation, or federal nation, as it were?
Well, we believe that only a Europe that acts together can solve our shared challenges. And that's why we need this federal Europe. So for us, it's not a goal in and of itself. It's a means to an end. If we want to have better social equality, if we want to be a counterbalancing force in global politics to China, Russia, US, India, if you want to be able to become more socially equal, I don't know if I already said that, maybe I'm repeating myself, but if you want to fight climate change if you want to have a humane treatment of migration flows, for all those things, we think we are better able to organize ourselves on the European level. Really, a simple example, for example, is the tax on kerosene. The fuel for airplanes is still not really taxed. Nobody does it. If you would do it as one single country, it will undermine your own airline industry. But if you do it as Europe as a whole, it will have less of that effect. Same goes for taxing big tech companies, Amazon, Google. Those tech companies tend to get away with paying little taxes. But if we would have a minimum tax for corporate tax in Europe, then we could stop the race to the bottom that's now happening.
So another part that I've noticed, a directly elected European Union president. I'm just wondering, this is quite a technical question, obviously probably different EU institutions, but how would that work? Would that be sort of like a US style president or a sort of more German style president? Would it replace the Commission? How would it interact with the Council? Do you know what I mean? So how would that work?
So the government, the European government that we foresee would actually, eventually replace the Commission. It would not be a presidential model like the US, because in the United States, the president has a lot of autonomy to take many decisions, similarly to the French system. Well, our system would be more like a parliamentary democracy on a European level. That's the dot at our horizon where we work towards.
It's really interesting. So I'm assuming the European Council would still play a role. You'd still have the heads of member states would still meet the European Council meetings, that would all still be the same, or?
Well, one thing that definitely needs to happen ASAP is getting rid of all the vetoes, because that's the most paralyzing factor. I think one of the main things that's going wrong within the EU lies in the veto right that's still apparent for so many different areas within the European Council. Easy example, I think everybody that works in foreign affairs agrees on the fact that in order to have a real say in the world, Europe should act with one voice. But at the moment, Cyprus was able to cancel any, can't think of the English word at the moment, but when there were these riots in Belarus, we wanted to have certain measures to make sure that we could support the people that were fighting for democracy.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why I can't think of the English word at the moment, but
sanctions.
Yes, sanctions. We wanted to have sanctions on Belarus, on the government there, but Cyprus was able to make sure that that didn't happen, although they only represent 0.2% of the entire European population. I mean, is there a city in your country that represents 0.2% of the population?
I think Norwich or something like that is sort of smaller city. Yeah,
imagine Norwich having a veto on all your foreign affairs.
Yeah, that would be. It's quite funny when you put it in that context, actually. Yeah, I think the veto is an interesting one. I think obviously, it's one of those things which I think obviously had quite good intentions when it was obviously first came in. There's a lot less member states, but I think obviously now I do agree it's probably a bit outdated now, given the current version of the European Union we have. I'm just right. So I'm assuming you accept some stuff is done better at the national level. Of course.
Yeah. That people think that we do everything on the European level. Not the case at all. We always say, think European, act local.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big criticisms, especially in the UK. Euroscepticism kind of talks about this big European state. It's going to take away all the powers from the British Parliament. It's this kind of image. So I'm just wondering, what sort of stuff do you think should be done at the national level?
Yeah, well, in some versions, a federal state can actually increase the amount of things that will be done on the local level. Germany is an example of that as well. Yeah. And another fear that people have is that one Europe will lead to one sort of monotonous culture where there's little room for diversity, where I would actually argue the contrary, that it could increase the amount of room there is for diversity. But to answer your question specifically, what should be done on a national level, the three topics that were always mostly said is healthcare, education, and some people also say everything army related. I would argue against that. But the funny thing is that, so everybody I spoke to said, okay, well, cool idea with your European political party, but education and healthcare should always remain a thing for the national level. Yet after the corona crisis, people actually start to argue that some of the things that we handle within healthcare should be done on the European level, especially the back end, the buying of medicines. Of course, with the COVID vaccines, it is not going as well as it.
That was going to be my next question, actually, about the COVID, comparing the UK to the EU.
Is that a showcase that this current European Commission is not doing its job, or that the concept of buying medicine with the entire continent is not a good idea? And I think it's the first and not the second. Okay. There's it really depends also per subject what part of it. So should I want the EU to dictate how healthcare for elderly people in the Netherlands should be done? No. But if you want to buy medicine together, I think that's still a good concept, a good idea.
Obviously, you mentioned it at the start. I guess you'd say the counter to your movement is obviously this far right populist movement, and you have the Freedom Party where you are in the Netherlands. You have the UKIPs of past where we are in the UK.
Yeah.
How do you fight that? Because it's such a sort of emotional argument, isn't it? That idea of, Europe's the bad guy. Think about your nation. Think about your identity. How do you, as a European party, how do you counter that quite emotional quite strong message.
Yeah, I believe in politics, it should always be a story of the head and the heart combined. We should be, I think, driven by our emotions, but steered by our thoughts. And often what we've seen, and what the trap I've also fallen into when I was lead candidate for the European elections in the Netherlands, is that I was telling only a story of the heart, of the head, and not of the heart. But I think so. It should be a combination of the two, but it should also be, in the end, for me, politics is a result driven field of work. So we should achieve results with the people that are elected on behalf of Volt. Currently, there's about 55 of them, 1 in the European Parliament, 3 in the Dutch National Parliament, and the others in local constituencies in Italy, Bulgaria, and Germany. And so if we achieve results, and by really coming up with another story that that paints a picture of a future that we want to work towards together, and that's convincing enough for other people to want to believe in it, and to tap along in or work with us to make it happen. Because sometimes the fear or the concerns that people that lean towards those parties are not only legitimate, but also very similar to the concerns that I might have.
Right.
But the solution direction is 180 degrees the other direction.
Yeah.
So where they say get rid of the EU, go back into our nationalistic shell, I say that's never going to happen, and never going to lead to a proper result where we fight these global challenges or continental challenges.
Yeah.
So that's how I try to counter it, by results, by a story of the head and the heart, and by painting a story for the future that they can believe in as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot in that. I think from the UK perspective, I remember the Brexit referendum. I think the big problem with the Remain campaign was it was all in the head, and it was all very much, it's going to be economically a disaster. It's going to call, like David Cameron even inferred, it might cause World War III. It was all these sort of negative stuff. There was never a positive European campaign in the UK for the Brexit referendum. I think that was a big mistake.
I think even if it was there, it might not have had the right effect, because they were also fighting 40 years of politicians claiming national European successes as their own, and blaming the EU for stuff it wasn't to blame for. We see that all across the continent, where people tend to, or politicians tend to never acknowledge for the broader public what the benefits of the EU are. That's one thing. And then another thing is that usually when there's a problem within your country, you hear the different political parties give their opinion about that problem. But when you, as a news agency, report on what's happening in Europe, you usually represent only what does our government say, versus what do other governments say. And because of that, you don't get the fragmented arguments of how other people within your own country think of what the government is doing, but they mainly hear what their government does versus what the other governments do. And because of that, it becomes like the European Football Cup, where it's who wins, who loses.
Yeah.
And it really taps into this massive us against them narrative. But if you think about it long enough, there's very few them, and it's mainly us.
I think in the UK, the media in particular, I think has always had that very much this sort of, I guess, us versus them. But even just whenever there's a problem, it's easier to blame it on Europe than it is to blame it on the UK. I guess that's probably, I was thinking that's probably the one benefit maybe of Brexit, is the fact that now UK politicians, I mean, I think they probably will still try to blame Europe on, they'll still try to blame things on Europe. Maybe it's harder now. And I hope, I guess that's maybe the only positive I think I can think of Brexit.
I once heard a story, and I'm not sure whether it's true, but maybe you can verify or falsify it. And then I need to make sure that I explain it correctly. There was, I think, in Liverpool or in Manchester, this big 25 years ago, this big disaster incident happened in the football stadium, where a lot of people passed away because there was a construction mistake in that football stadium. And then I think the the Sun wrote very negative about the role of the fans in that episode, and because of that, they stopped selling the Sun or one of those.
Yeah, that was the Hillsborough. It was in Sheffield. It was Liverpool versus Sheffield Wednesday.
Yeah,
But
and
obviously it was Liverpool. The Liverpool fans were blamed for this horrible disaster, this horrible tragedy in Hillsborough. I think 96 football fans tragically passed away in that. Obviously, that's a story which hurts me quite a lot because I'm a massive football fan. So that really isn't emotionally. And the Sun basically blamed the fans, and now Liverpool. Yeah, you can't buy a copy of the Sun in Liverpool now because
because of that, there were more people there that voted for Remain than for Leave. Is what I've been told.
I'm not sure if that I have heard that before. I'm not sure if that's true. I mean, I guess that there is a logic to it, but obviously, I mean, I don't think anyone's ever done a study. As an academic, I like to have a study done to prove it, and I haven't seen any proof of it. But I guess it makes sense, and anecdotally, it's quite nice. I like it as a story. It proves the point.
Yeah.
So finally, with regards to the idea of European cooperation, you talked about an army, and you said you were negative to it. I am curious. Do we not need, if you are going to have a European federal state, do you not then need a European federal army, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, when you say the word army, it's people immediately associate it with a certain picture in mind. But I think the army of the future will look very different from the army of the past. If you see that in Russia, when they invaded Georgia in 2008, the first thing they did was break down the internet. So much of what is going on is now cyber warfare. And if a general I once spoke to told me that in order to create a defense force, you need at least 30 years. So if you want to create a European defense force, then you have to think 30 years ahead. So in 2051, do you think by that time you will benefit from a European defense force? If the answer is yes, start now. And for me, that's the case. So if we could have a European army or a European defense force tomorrow, but we would not have the democratic innovations that we also want to do in parallel, then I would not want to do it. But if we make those two things happen in parallel, then in 30 years from now, I think that we're going to be happy that we have a European defense force if we manage to do it.
I guess this is a completely hypothetical question, but would the EU then become a member of NATO? It's a weird question. But
we do want the EU to claim the seat in the UN Council, and I'm not sure whether Europe should be as one part of NATO. Then I do think NATO still has a relevance, even if this would happen, because of course NATO is broader than the EU.
Yeah. So, looking more broadly, then obviously the big policy of Volt is pro-Europeanism. But what is the sort of, if you had to describe its ideological makeup more broadly, in the terms of left, right, taxation versus free market, all that sort of stuff, how would you sort of describe Volt's ideological position, its makeup?
In 3 words, I would say social, liberal, and green.
Okay.
I think we've done these kind of surveys before within our followers and our supporters. What's the main problem for you? And top of the list for everyone, fighting climate change. So that's the main thing. The average Volt person is in the beginning of its 30s, but that's an average because we have a lot of people above 60 and a lot of people that are 18 to 35. But so I think 3/4 of our people are between 18 and 35, and then the second quarter is 60 plus. And I think for almost all of them, fighting climate change is the #1 priority. We do also think that and we're also social and liberal, which is a combination that you see in some countries already, but not in all.
Okay, that's interesting. So finally, I want to talk about sort of the electoral performance of Volt so far. So you won a single seat in Germany in the 2019 European elections.
Yes.
You won 3 seats this month in the Dutch election just gone. which was good. I mean, that was interesting because I think about a month before I was looking at polls, and I think you were predicted to get 1 seat, so you did get a small boost towards the end in that election, I think.
Yeah, we have always said that we were aiming for 3 seats and that it was realistic. So we achieved our goal, and it was, in the end, it was in line with our expectations. But in the beginning, you make some assumptions, and those assumptions still need to happen. Yeah, so 3 months before, it was still like, oh, are we ever going to make this? But a week before the elections, we're like, okay, we're on the right track. It seems like we're going to reach our goal.
What sort of did you have any idea who was voting for Volt? As in, which sort of people were voting for Volt? Do you have any idea? Or
Yes. So if there you have all these lists of voter constituencies, and Volt topped the list of most highly educated voters, and was second in age group. So young people who are highly educated. And that's also, I think, that the makeup of, or was the makeup of, most of our candidates. We had roughly 30 candidates, and 2/3 of them were below 35. And most of them highly educated. I think a lot more people that are also have a beta background, so or not alphas or gammas, but a beta background, and that are more tech savvy. We also want a Ministry of Digital Affairs, for example, and I think a lot of our program spearheads other party programs on that point. So young people, often highly educated, mostly in and around cities. However, that is not what we intend to remain forever, because while we grow, we want to have a broader support base, go to rural areas more, attract a bigger group that is more diverse.
Yeah, that's interesting. So obviously with the Dutch election, it's obviously very different to how things are done in the UK. Lots more parties, lots more evenly balanced sort of parties.
Yeah.
I'm interested in terms of the government formation. Has there been any discussion involved about joining a government, or is that a bit too soon, a bit too not
no, definitely those conversations start. I mean, often even before the vote has happened. So there's now a record of 17 political parties in our parliament. Our parliament has 150 seats. And the government basically needs the majority of 76 seats to get there. Sometimes you have minority governments, but it doesn't happen often. And in some of the makeups, you can see, hey, this would be a logical combination that could include Volt. At the same time, when we are a party that focuses on content, wants nuance, wants to really achieve results by adding to the legislative process, and in that sense, we don't have a lot of underbelly solutions. Or I don't know if that word translates to English, but we have well thought through fact-based policies and stuff. So in order to be a true addition to a government, one needs to know how things work. And we are a very young movement. Our 3 elected representatives, our 3 MPs, have never been an MP before. They're 35, 42, and 32. Somebody put it as, if you've just learned to walk, you shouldn't do acrobatics in a circus. So for us, it's not the most logical thing to do in the moment. At the same time, we do see that in German cities, we are in the local governments, because our main, I think, factor is within Volt and within individuals within Volt is we want to take responsibility. We want to build and constructively build towards a better Europe. And taking responsibility is part of that. So in the end, being part of a government is definitely what we are going for.
So you said you had local seats, and was it Germany, Bulgaria, and one other country? Did you say?
And
Italy. That's interesting. Well, Bulgaria interests me in particular, just because I think when you think of the sort of traditional European states, maybe Bulgaria doesn't come up as one. So I'm curious. That's quite interesting that you have seats there.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
actually, on April 4, there's national elections in Bulgaria, and we are participating there as well.
Okay.
Basically, with a strong anti-corruption agenda, in a coalition of people that or parties that want to get rid of the current corrupt government. So it's very interesting for us if we will also manage to get into national parliament there, which I hope, because then East and West can unite the rest.
It's it is one of my favorite cities, Sofia. I've been there a couple of times. It's just a really cool
really?
place.
Yeah.
Yeah. My ex-girlfriend was Bulgarian, so I've been there quite a few times. It's one of my favorite European countries to visit. So
nice. Yeah, I like it a lot too. That city. It's where I was elected as a co-president. So
all right.
there.
So yeah, very good, very nice. Also very cheap beer as well, which I quite like.
Yeah,
it's always good. So my final question, I guess, what is the electoral ambition of your party looking in the long term? Like where is your limit? How high is the limit, as it were, for your party?
In terms of ambitions, I think there's no limit. But what our vision is for the next 5 years is we want to lead by example to foster a united Europe. And the goal that we attach to that vision is that we want to have 25 MEPs in 7 different countries by 2024. Why is that? Currently, one of the things that we criticize in the European Parliament is that you have combinations of national parties that nobody knows, that have sometimes on a national level entirely different policies and different values. We want to work towards this European democracy, and we think becoming the first group in the European Parliament that has the same name and the same electoral program will be paving the way to achieve that. And in order for a group to be formed in the European Parliament, you need 25 seats.
Okay. That's it. Thank you so much for your time. This has been really, really interesting to chat to you. It's been it's a really interesting idea, actually. So yeah, it's really fascinating to have you on to chat about it. Thank you so much for your time.
Cool. And if I can say one last thing, the backbone of Volt is all our local teams and the individuals that also feel like, hey, I want to do something to improve my society and work towards a better future, a future made in Europe. So if you are watching this and you want to participate, please visit our website. There's probably a team around your city where you live as well, or a village where you live, and then we can work on it together.
Yeah, I did notice there's one in Oxford where I live. So they're around.
Nice. Okay, there's actually a lot more. There's I think we have about 20 different ones in the UK. So
yeah, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you too.
Cheers. Hi guys, thank you for watching this latest episode of PhD-Politico Discussions. If you enjoyed this video, then please don't forget to give it a like. And if you want to watch more content like this, then please do subscribe. Bye guys.